Greetings, dear listener, and sub, and philosopher, and hardcore thinker, and critical, skeptical, doubtful, all the good stuff that you need to be in order to be a functional human being, in my opinion. Welcome to part 4 of my deconstruction of a comment or some comments that Bernardo Kastrup made on a show called Monistic Idealism some 6 days ago. And at this point, we've reached around the 1 hour, 45 seconds, right? But before I dive in, I might mention that I have sort of optimized, or what's it called? Concisified. I cleaned up my list of major criticism of Bernardo Kastrup's ontology, and I actually add a few more little snippets here and there. So I might actually want to go through it again in order to make sure that we are on the same page, right? Okay, so I like to have structure in my thinking. So this structure I'm presenting, this is in the same kind of structure that I would approach if I was to introduce or present my complete philosophy. I would be starting somewhere and I would be ending somewhere, and there would be dependencies between each step until I reach the final point. I can't just philosophize in midstream and grab whatever shit I can find in order to argue for whatever I want to argue, right? Just like basically every fucking philosopher in the world does, right? So the first thing you would want is some kind of starting point. I would call that a reduction base. And I like that term, and it's actually something that I've been inspired from. I used to use the term first principles, but I actually like the idea of reduction base better. And it's inspired by Bernardo Kastrup. So shout out there, But then when you reduce to a lower level than the complete description of what there is in your experience, or what there is that you have access to in the sense of what phenomena do I have. So the reduction base is some part of some particular aspect or some category of my phenomena. But in order to describe all the phenomena and how they've worked together, I create what is called an ontology, right? Now, when I've done that, found a base and used that to describe the whole of what there is that I have access to, my phenomena, I could start to ponder about whether or not there's something beyond what I have access to. Can I argue for that, whether or not that's the case, right? If I can argue for an external world, I might attempt to do some metaphysics, which would be a kind of meta-ontology, you could say, right? Metaphysics could be a kind, metaphysics could be an ontology of an external world, right? You could see metaphysics as that. But it depends on whether or not you can actually establish an external world, or how you go about doing that, if you're doing it, right? All these arguments have to hang together. You can't just bring shit in out of nowhere, as I keep saying, right? And his philosophy stops at metaphysics. He doesn't go any further, right? But there are other categories of philosophy that you could very likely want to dive into if you have done all this foundational philosophy, which might be at least two very, very important kinds of philosophy, which is epistemology, to get to and the definition of knowledge, and ethics, which is getting to a moral principle, right? I would call it a moral principle. You might call it something else, right? And under the way, you might also want to do something called objectivity and a philosophy of science, maybe, right? He stops at metaphysics, in my opinion, right? So one way to see that the problem is that all that comes after metaphysics, which is sort of a metaphysics, is actually, you could very well see it as a sidekick to ontology, because metaphysics doesn't come after ontology, but it basically comes before ontology, because metaphysics is that which is before what you have access to, which is your ontology, right? But you only arrived at the idea of metaphysics because you have an ontology or you have some phenomena. So it points very quickly to metaphysics is actually a circular argument, right? That's why I don't like metaphysics. I am fine with pondering about an external world, but I'm not fine with trying to come up with an idea what the hell, how it works and what it's made of, right? Okay, so under these categories, I have under reduction base. He doesn't present any base. Oh, excuse me. Actually, he doesn't. But no actual reduction is presented. He talks about reduction and having a reduction base and having a base, right? He talks about how the shortcomings of the conceptual reduction of science, right? You have matter, and then you have atoms or molecules, atoms, you have particles, and you have quarks, and you can go on in this conceptual mind game, right? And I don't like that either. Honestly, it's just conceptual mindfuckery, right? You're never going to get to any, because you have left your actual ontology behind, right? You're working in your conceptual mindfuckery using this elementary particle conceptual reduction game. That's why I would like the Hadron Collider to be shut down and all the money returned to the people where they were actually stolen from, right? But then in his PhD defense, which you can find online, and I have criticized this particular aspect of it on my channel a few weeks back, he appeals to cherry picking. I was like, what? I remember I have watched a bit of this defense way back, but I didn't take it too seriously. But when I saw this, I have to dig into this because I found out that the other writing I had deconstructed or scrutinized was actually the writing that was his thesis. So I went back and said, okay, how did he actually defend his thesis? And then I find out how he gets to a reduction base, he just chooses it. He appeals to the principle, you can just choose whatever you want. How the hell can this be foundational philosophy? I mean, I was baffled by this. It's incredible that it goes unchallenged by all the academics who are sitting there trying to pick his treatise apart. Apparently, supposedly, but they're not. They're just trying to solidify academia so they can live in their little, tax-funded ivory tower of academia and avoid going out doing manual labor just like the rest of us, right? And then the only thing I can point to that he talks about dashboard, and which he has explicitly called a metaphor. That is the starting point for him to start. When he starts to talk about his metaphysics or / ontology, which is also two terms he conflates, right? He starts about talking about a dashboard. Imagine yourself sitting in an airplane cockpit, right? So that's the starting point for his thinking. That must be a base, a kind of a base, right? And it's closer to a base than whatever he can come up with when he has cherry-picked shit, right? But it's confusing how he does this, right? It's very confusing, and this is the foundation, right? This is the reduction base. It is confused beyond approach, in my opinion. If there's just a minuscule potential misunderstanding in what you're doing, in what is the base of your thinking, it should be discarded or criticized or clarified immediately. He's basically basing his philosophy on something that is incomprehensible to me, right? And also, he conflates dashboard and perception. But is it overlapping, or is it just, are there common areas and there's something that is not common between perception and dashboard? It's not clarified, right? A metaphor is an abstraction that is an explanation or a story in another setting than the actual philosophy you're trying to present. right? So when you're using a metaphor, it's like, okay, yeah, but it's like as if I was sitting on a train and I was moving this way and I will feel the wind in my hair. It's the same. That is a metaphorical, I just came up with something there, right? But it's a metaphorical explanation of something that might be usually harder to explain without using the metaphor. But that doesn't mean the metaphor is all of a sudden become the philosophy you're trying to present. So if he stays in the idea of metaphor, he's actually not disclosing what it is that metaphor is based on. And that which is based on must be that perception and those phenomena that he tries so hard to avoid not categorizing, right? Or qualifying, or listing, or disclosing the terms used and interdependencies and how he gets to a base, because if he appeals to a base, there must be an interdependency between his phenomena, at least to the best of my understanding, right? So it's extremely confused, this, right? And this cherry-picking idea is beyond my worst nightmare of bad philosophy, right? Okay, so if we are talking about the actual ontology that he attempts to present, he confuses the terms metaphysics and ontology. I'd like things to be sort of strict what he's talking about. At one point he talks about ontology, and next time he talks about metaphysics, as if it's sort of more or less the same. If it's the same, why are you using two different terms? And if they're not the same, why are you not disclosing the difference, right? And finally, it's like there is no ontology presented. Yes, he says consciousness only ontology, and that's where it's okay, now we're using consciousness instead of the term mind, right? There is no ontology. He's just saying everything is mind, but that's useless, right? And it's also sophist. I might need to point this out more clearly, because if you say everything is X, you're maybe I should carry on. Mind is a synthetic abstraction, in my opinion, so it cannot be an ontology. What I'm trying to say is that you can't, to metaphorically, if you talk about France, you can't go and observe France. France is a synthetic label put on a specific collection of trees and people and houses and lakes and ground and soil and so on, right? Mountains. But you can't go and look and say, oh my God, there's France over there. Look, see, it's brown. And this is not how it works. And the same is the case with the idea of mind or consciousness. It is an artificial or synthetic label put on a collection of phenomena. And when you're doing ontology, it's basically all phenomena, right? So mind is sort of an artificially synthetic construction wherein you are mentally putting or suspending all the phenomena. That's where they live, so to say, right? Within mind. But you're experiencing the phenomena, right? You're not experiencing mind. Mind is one of the phenomena, actually, if anything, right? Content of dashboard not described, so nothing ontology, no, as I mentioned maybe earlier, right? Conflates dashboard and perception. Yeah, I mentioned that also, right? Maybe reduction-based ontology should be slapped together in one reduction-based ontology. Maybe reduction-based is one of the part of the methods or things you do when you're doing ontology. So I'll just call it ontology and put reduction-based into that. That might actually simplify things. It would make it more parsimonious, maybe. When we get to the idea, let's say he has established an ontology, which he hasn't, right? But let us say that he has done that. Now he wants to fabulate about, is there something beyond my phenomena? Then he has no argument. He comes up with the idea, or he relates to the idea, or ponders about the idea of an external world, but there is no argument anywhere for it. You can't just start with an ontology and then say, now there is something beyond the ontology. Well, how does that work, right? And he also tries to bring it all together in saying, well, everything is ontology, everything is mind, that everything is ontology, that everything is metaphysics. Therefore, everything is described because I came up with the term mind. That's a bit of a stretch, right? That's a fucking powerful term to use, mind. I don't buy that, right? So that external world is just given, right? He takes an external world for granted. Yeah, as I said, right? External can only be imagined, so further imagination is invalid. Yes, what I'm trying to say here is that what he violates is that external world can only be imagined because you can't experience it for obvious reasons, right? If it's not a part of your phenomena, then it's imagined. Then it's a part of the phenomena. It's an imaginary phenomena within your collection of phenomena that has the imagination of something outside phenomena, right? It must be, otherwise you wouldn't have access to it. You wouldn't imagine it. So if it's an imagination, it's a part of your phenomena. And if it's a part of your phenomena, it cannot be outside. Even if it's something that appeals to an idea of an outside, it's still a phenomena within your set of phenomena, right? So it's an imagination about an external world. That doesn't mean you have all of a sudden opened the doors of perception into an external world, right? Just because you imagined it, because your imagination, as I said, is a phenomena. So when he starts to talk about what it's made of and how it works, he's just basing one imagination upon another imagination. So that's why I talk about these cloud castles all the time that he's doing. He's living in this imagination land where he can come up with whatever he wants. And I have to admit, I think that's where he wants to go. Because he doesn't want to live in reality. He wants to go to his cloud castle mind daddy and live there, right? I will have to conclude that. Otherwise, why the hell would you do shit like this, right? Okay, so metaphysics is when he has established or attempted to establish that is the external world. What is it made of, right? But my first question would be, why would you do metaphysics? Because it's either circular or useless. Because he's working from that apparent dashboard, right? So because he has a dashboard, he came up with the metaphysics. And if the metaphysics changes his understanding of his dashboard, he have to go back and change that metaphysics because he used the dashboard in order to create that first metaphysics. And then we are into an infinite recurrence of creating a new metaphysics based on a new dashboard understanding from a new metaphysics and so on, right? But if it doesn't change the dashboard, why the hell would I go and do the metaphysics? So in any case, it's maybe both circular and useless, right? That's a problem, because why are you doing it? It's either you're either destroying the foundation you're working from, or it doesn't influence the foundation, and then you're none the wiser, right? And then he says, well, everything is mind. But why only mind? Right? There is no argument there, right? He just says, well, if I say it's only mind, I avoid dualism. Well, that's not a fucking argument, is it? Another thing is, if he says mind is everything, there should be no further philosophy. He has just referenced everything, right? And it's only one thing, which is mind. Then you can't, even if he tries to say, there are also ripples and also meta-consciousness, and there's also this and that and the other. No. You can't do that. That's a violation. If you say everything is mind, you're basically creating the idea of a superstring called mind that everything is made of, and there's no further differentiation, right? Otherwise, you're violating your own reduction base, which was this mind thing, right? So he, by arguing for various ripples and all sorts of other shit, he's actually violating his reduction base, because he's starting to refer to something that should be in his reduction base, in his ontology, right? So that's why I say this area of philosophy is so paved with circular, stupid arguments everywhere from everybody who has seemingly tried to do this. It's one big fucking circular argument that is potentially, usually useless, right? he implies God. All of a sudden, yeah, you can call it God if you want. What? Why would you want to bring in thousands and thousands years of stupid, child abuse, right? And then this appeal to parsimony. It's parsimonious, right? It's not an argument. It's rather aesthetics, in my opinion, right? That's a closer argument, a closer thing I can say. It's sort of, it looks nice. It looks simple. It's sort of a kind of aesthetics, right? Then also, and this is something I have rephrased, right? He states that all science in this previous part here, right? All science is mediated by perception. But then he appeals to science to settle an ontology based on perception. Right? You can't do that. That's circular. It's so unbelievably circular that any normal human being should be able to see it. Apparently he can't. Right? And he uses DID, he uses evolution, and he uses the second law of thermodynamics, more specifically the idea of entropy, which is also a kind of aesthetics, right? I would actually argue entropy is not something you can experience. It's an idea of the usefulness of energy. Energy itself being an abstraction you don't have access to, just like, gravity. So it's really far-fetched, these epicycles of mindfuckery. In order to come up with an idea of you just have to pay attention to our creation story of Essentia Foundation, where we are trying to solve the problems of the world. Pay attention, stupid little peasant, right? So be careful with this dude, right? Okay, maybe I should go into further discussion here, right? We are at 1:43:45. Let me see if I can find the timestamps. 1:43:45. We are at analytic idealism and closer to truth. Oh yeah, closer to God, right?
There are, one day if I live long and I become an old man, one day I will write a book. Everything I think is the case, but don't dare argue. Don't dare
argue. Well, why don't you dare argue? Are you afraid of pushback? Or are you so full of shit that you're saying, I can't present this because it's too stupid. People will find out that I'm really full of shit all the time, right? It reminds me, isn't there a Woody Allen movie called All the Things You Wanted to Ask About Sex was Afraid to? I'm paraphrasing a bit, right? All the things you want to ask about sex, but was afraid to ask. Okay, maybe you should watch a Woody Allen movie.
Argue for, or don't dare.
I can't help it. I have to look it up. I have to look it up. Sorry about that. Yeah, everything you always wanted to know about sex, but were afraid to ask. Never mind.
Defend or try to prove.
Again, he's a scientist. You don't prove philosophy. You present your philosophy, right? You don't try to prove your philosophy. You present it, right? I have some phenomena. I have an idea and a theory of what the hell is going on. I'm going to prove it. That's not philosophy. That is a scientific approach. And you can use scientific approaches to philosophy because science is based on philosophy. Science is the slave of philosophy. It's idiotic.
There is a lot more going on.
Oh, let me sit here and close my eyes and look like a guru. I am introspecting while I'm telling you about my big thing, right?
Horatio, then is dreamed up in our philosophy, even analytic idealism. I think analytic idealism is closer to truth.
Closer to truth. Oh my God, I think as my philosophy that I have cocked up in my attic, I think it's closer to truth, the one thing, the I think I'm good. I am Mr. Bernardo Hard-on Collider Kastrup, right?
It opens the right doors for us to go across.
Oh, yeah, the doors of perception are opening. I can, with my mind control, I can open the doors of perception and see, oh, there it is. The one eye, the pyramid, the... my coat of arms is shining towards me, right?
Later, in order to get better at making sense of what is really going on.
What is really going on? Yeah, my stupid experience of my trousers and my morning dump and my Brussels sprouts
But
are not
what is
the real thing. I want to understand what my big mind dad is doing to me. I'm in service of him, and I have to spy for him because he's going to suck my meta-conscious logbook out of me in 40 years when I'm dying. And maybe he's going to suck something up he don't like. And I have to make sure that I write all the right books and say the right things in order to be in alignment with my mind daddy. Right? He has sort of a Jesus complex. He thinks he's sort of God's son or something like that, right?
really going on is not coaxed or encompassed by the story of analytic idealism.
I think Robert Lawrence Kuhn would like some of the clips you were saying there about closer to truth. I think it fits very well.
Yeah, whatever.
Clip.
I need to go back and listen one
Is
more.
not sense of what is really going on. But what is really going on is not coaxed or encompassed by the story of analytic idealism.
So he calls analytic idealism a story. Now it's no longer a philosophy. It's just a story. He's just a storyteller, right? I am a storyteller. Karen Blixen, the storyteller. I am a storyteller. What is really going on? Isn't that what analytic idealism tries to do? Are you trying to grapple with the idea of what the hell is going on? And now you're saying it isn't. What are you trying to do? Because you're not talking about tomatoes and elephants, are you?
Or encompassed by the story of analytic idealism.
I think Robert Lawrence.
Oh my God, it sounds so profound. He's sitting there smiling and being so confident about how insightful and emotional and empathetic. And he's channeling the daemon of the heart and the mind and the one thing through the doors of perception, right?
Lawrence Kuhn would like some of the clips you were saying there about closer to truth. I think it fits very well.
But you still think that analytic idealism has a good chance of being right in the end, perhaps?
Being right, perhaps, maybe. I mean, I would very much like it to be right. Can you give me hope that somebody might be able to say that it's actually... But he's doing science, right? He's trying to... What is the term? When you're trying to take something that works in one place and force it into another place where it doesn't work, or it shouldn't work, or it's not allowed to work, right? He's taking science out of the dashboard and putting it in on the other end of the dashboard, trying to come up with the ideas of ripples and explaining it as a theory, scientific theory, behind his direct experiences, right? He's basically violating everything he's trying to criticize. He's being a materialist about it. He just calls it ripples rather than matter. Who gives a crap what he calls it, right? But you want this philosophy because it's the newest and most promising sophistry that can get you to God, because that's where you want to go, right? Monistic idealist. He's a Christian. I suppose you, as the sidekick there, is his little Christian minion, right? He's sitting there, Mr. Monistic Idealism, and doesn't show his face. He's sitting behind the curtain and ordering you around, right? I see this so often, right? Christians, they love bossing people around, right? They're being bossed around by their master. But if they can raise themselves a little up and then boss their congregation or their little minions about, oh, they love it. The Christians are the most pathetic, mindless, spineless losers there are out there, right? You there on the picture now, I would encourage you to think very, very, very hard about this and whether or not this is a good future for you, right? Wake up, mate. Get a fucking life.
Or you just
I think analytic idealism is the best story we have today.
Mr. Story, it's the best story. Yes, and it's not just it's our philosophy now, because I decided it is. It's just not just my philosophy, or my story, by the way. I'm downgrading it to a story now, right? It's the best there is out there, of course, because I made it. And I've been talking to my mind daddy, right?
And I think we will find out that it's largely right. But it's
we can figure out that it's largely so if you don't know if it's right, what is it now then? What's the status of it now? It's just harebrained scheming of some kind, right? It hasn't been proven right yet, but somebody's probably going to do it in the future, right? At least it's slightly more right than all the crappy shit out there at the moment, right? I mean, well, it sounds to me like he's from being very confident this is the only real philosophy out there. Now it's sort of downgraded to it's only slightly more toxically, shittily bad than all the other perfectly shittily bad philosophy out there. So it's still better than what is... I think I better do my own philosophy, right? Maybe I should do my own thinking rather than trusting this garbage, mumbo jumbo, mindfuckery. I mean, oh man.
Does not go into the level of detail, exfoliation, nuance, and elaboration that is required to really account for what is really going on. I think the starting point that closes the doors to blind alleys prevents us from insisting on it stops us from beating dead horses. That's the main merit of it.
So please step out of all these rhetorical guru kind of mystic, the blind alleys and the doors. You're staying in metaphor land. At what point do we get down to business here and talk about the real actual thing in your ontology? How does a tomato fit into this? I want to understand how does a tomato fit? How does a tomato fit into your ontology? How can I wind my way back from all these doors of this, that, and the other, and the mind at large into a tomato? How does it fit? How is the connection? You can't just say, yeah, there might be a tomato on your dashboard. Yeah, it's just a dial. Metaphor. No. We have to get down to business here, right? Because I'm experiencing tomatoes and loudspeakers and cars and skies and clouds and people who want to steal my fucking money and so on, right? When do we get to all that? No, you don't want to go there, right? Because it's boring every day. Oh, it's for the peasants. No, I'm living in my high-flying academic cloud castle, right? It makes me feel good and I feel so smart, right?
Stops the beating of dead horses, which is a waste of human time and energy.
What about the Hadron Collider, right? Isn't that a waste of time and money, right? All the people who have been forced out of their homes or couldn't afford a summer holiday with their children because they had to pay for a fucking Hadron Collider for God knows how many years, and they're thinking about building something that is even 10 times larger than the one there is now. That costs a megalomaniacal fortune. No, you have to pay, little peasant, right? But these arguments I'm dealing with, we don't have to, I'm so smart. Yes.
And it opens the right doors. But I do not think.
How do you know it's the right doors? Who's going to tell you? Who's going to decide? Are you Mr. Know-it-all? Right? Are you the one who's going to be the judge of whether or not these doors are good or not? Because that's what I'm hearing. You're the smart one. We are just the little peasants who have to sit. Yes, I am Mr. Hadron Collider Kastrup. I have opened the right door over there. So you just have to pay attention, right?
It goes across all the right doors to unveil what is on the other side. Because I don't think that is possible for the human cognitive system at this point. And it's not even possible for our cultural references at this point. In other words, it's not feasible.
How does cultural references fit into your ontology? I would like to know, right? Why are you talking about all this shit if it's not something I can trace back in your ontology? Culture, is there some mind thing going on somewhere? Is it a ripple? How do I get to it, right? No, because ripple and mind is so abstract, it's basically useless for anything. And therefore, because it's useless, but he can convince people, all his philosophy is based on it, whatever he comes up with after he says ripple and mind is justified because it's not justified, but it's a pretense of justification. Because he can have many categories as he wants and come up with talk about whatever he wants. Because you can always say, well, it's all mind. It's all mind ripples, right? Yeah. Culture. Well, at the end of the day, it's all mind, right? So you're left with nothing, right?
Physiologically possible and not culturally possible. I think, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think.
Oh my God, it's a good argument because you're not alone in it, right? No, there's more than me. There's also somebody in Amsterdam who thinks the same way as I do. So we are two now, at least two. So it's twice as good, right?
People who are idealists and are thoughtful idealists, they know this too, which is.
No. Now you're referring to epistemology and knowledge, right? Would you mind handing me your definition of knowledge before you use the term know? Would you mind, please? Right?
There is more going on than can be accounted for with the clean.
So what do you mean there's more going on than be accounted for? But if you're using your account, then there can't be more. If there's more going on, you have to clarify how you get to it. But then it's just a word salad, this. He's just throwing word salad. He's just pouring softest honey into your ears, hoping that you're going to eat it raw, without any clear, rigid argumentation of any kind. So he's appealing to all those who are already halfway towards woo-woo shit of some kind. And he's going to make them want to go his way, because he's also halfway there, right? So he has one leg in woo-woo land and one leg in philosophy, science, or at least pretending to have, right? So you can combine the various disciplines into. It's about controlling the narrative, you could say, right? It has been this way, but religion tries to control the narrative of philosophy by saying, yeah, but we also are Aristotelians, we are also Platonists, and we want to control the narrative. You are not allowed to have go and philosophize over there. No, we are taking control of the narrative of philosophy. So, you're saying philosophy? Yeah, but we have control of the narrative because we are also Aristotelians and Neoplatonists, right? So you're not allowed to sit over there and have your own philosophy. We are controlling the narrative of philosophy also. So he wants to control all the narratives, all the cultural narratives, all the psychological narratives, all the philosophical narratives, all the scientific narratives, all the woo-woo and religious narratives, everything into one thing called Essentia Foundation with Fred Master on the top, and here's this little Darth Vader minion going out and controlling the people, right?
Neat story of idealism that we are putting forward to the culture right now. It's just that what it cannot account for is not culturally acknowledged either. It is considered untrue.
But what do you mean control? Okay, show me an example of culturally controlled, or whatever the term was, right? Yeah, words are cheap, right? It's easy to just shove some words in my face and, culturally, right? Give me the ontology that enables you to talk about these things. No, because it's completely disconnected. It's just this magical term called mind that is it's a fits all shapes, or fits all sizes. One size fits all term that is a magical mind. Oh my God, everything is mind. Everything is solved, right?
Or rumor or delusion or stuff that we don't need to spend our time on. Now, analytic idealism has a very clean story that is meant to account for everything that we do acknowledge, that we can do. But there is a lot more going on than we acknowledge. And analytic idealism doesn't try to account for that, because culturally it would be self-defeating. It would, for instance, have an immediate impact on how I am seen, on how my credibility is perceived, because I would need to acknowledge that I take certain things seriously that the vast majority of pundits would say you shouldn't take them seriously. So I don't pollute the neat story of an analytic idealism by trying to stretch it to account for those things, because it would backfire. And the cultural game is played one step at a time. Analytic idealism is a big step. Idealism, I don't want to make it about my own formulation. Idealism is a big step forward, as much as it is a step back to origins. It's an enormous step forward, which we have to make.
Why is it forward? Why is it not an enormous step backward? It might be an enormous step or a very big hurdle to get over in people's common thinking. But who says it's a step forward? It's because you say it. And what is the measure stick of forwardness? Right? It's sophistry. He's constantly appealing to sophistry while he says, "Oh yeah, science, philosophy. Oh my God, I'm I'm a PhD, everywhere, right?" But when you listen to what he says, it's just a stream of consciousness. It's just words grabbed out of the air in the moment. So on the fly word tsunami, right? If it has to be correctly philosophical, it's not about sitting 8 hours and throwing words at people. It is presenting some rigidity. And when I use this term, I mean this. When I use this term, I mean that. And I'm not coming up with another term for the same thing I just mentioned. I'm not going to say ontology and the next moment I'm calling it metaphysics, right? That's the kind of rigidity I'm looking for. And that's why I'm fucking deeply critical of this guy, because he's all over the place, right? All he's concerned about trying to convince people whatever it needs, whatever it takes to get them on his side. So he can feel that the majority of people in the world thinking the same way as he does, because he doesn't have the spine to do his own thinking or just say, this is my philosophy, I'm going with this. I don't need to convince somebody else about it, right? But because he hasn't a spine, he has to convince people. And that's why there are governments and all sorts of shit where people have to conform to somebody's rules. Because those somebody doesn't have a spine just to follow their own rules, right?
And then we have to acclimatize to that. And to acclimatize to that step would take decades. Once we are acclimatized to it, once we are used to it, once idealism becomes our lived reality, as opposed to a conceptual idea that needs to be critiqued and evaluated. Once it becomes the natural worldview, what we teach our children, once that happens, then we are fully acclimatized. Now we can try to take a bigger bite of the cake of mystery in which we are immersed.
The cake of mystery. Give me a fucking break, cake. The cake of mystery. So he's basically saying he's a mystic because he's solving a mystery, right? He's a mystic.
Trying to take that bite before we are acclimatized is self-defeating. It will create confusion, noise.
Yes, the little people, they are too stupid to understand this. They will start revolutions. They will start to burn things down, and they will create anarchy. So we have to control them to make sure that they don't freak out when we enforce this big thing on them, right? We have to have government control, right? We have to force them. It's just under the surface, right? Spineless people like this guy will always appeal to violent power, somehow or another. They won't say it outright, but it's hidden under this, right? That's why something like democracy is so fucking dangerous, because the power that is built into it, rather than having slavery, 19th century old school slavery, now everybody is a slave to the system, right? Slave to the grind, slave to the man, to the machine. Nobody can get it. It's one big fucking prison planet. But it's under the covers. It's hidden. It's only the most smart psychopaths who can juggle this subconscious that you are a slave, but your consciousness tells you you're not a slave, so you can live this life as a slave, pretending not to be a slave, right? And then all these sort of smart but weak-ass corrupt people are popping up in order to make you think you have something to say, you can think for yourself, while at the same time subordinate yourself to them. So this control mechanism can stay in place. All right? That's why I keep coming back to this guy, because he's basically probably the most prolific sophist to keep this charade of the human earthly prison planet going for another couple of decades, right? Until they either self-destruct or self-annihilate, or some magical thing that will happen that will actually unwind the prison planet and finally make human beings free, right? But they won't. They have been told that freedom is slavery, right? Freedom is anarchy and destruction. So you have to have a government controlling you to make sure that nobody controls you, right? It's a mindfuckery beyond comprehension, right? And it takes this level of sophistry to try to convince you to keep the shit going, right? To accept your child abuse and think, no, mommy and daddy was the smartest philosopher in the world. You just have to accept the shit, right?
It will evoke and trigger emotions that are not useful.
Oh no, the little peasant they will rally, they will grab their pitchforks and go to we have to control them.
Point. And in saying this, I am not undermining analytic idealism. I'm not being dishonest. The story I'm telling...
No, but you're trying to say that when people are force-fed this black pill or whatever, purple pill or whatever it is, philosophical pill, that they are going to reject it, just like I am. I'm just very premature in it, in the sense that I'm so smart I can see what this shit is, right? Create my list of problems over here to the left. That's why I'm doing this, because It has to be done before it gets any kind of critical mass. I don't think it will, but doing my bit to make sure that it doesn't. I'm trying to point out all its shortcomings, right? And why it's bullshit.
Is the story I believe in? Actually, it's the story I live. I live my life according to that story. All I'm
So
saying.
it's just a story. You're just a storyteller. Hey, I have a story. You might want to live this way, right? Ripples. You like that? You like ripples? I'm dangling a little ripple in front of you. I have a story about ripples. It might make you happy.
Is that the story needs to be extended to really account for what is really going on. But it's not useful, not productive to try to do that right now. We have to acclimatize to that neat, constrained story first. Before.
So he's a very clever dude. No doubt about it, right? So he's trying to diminish by saying we have not gone anywhere in thinking at any time in the last 3,000 years. We are still at ground zero and we don't know what the fuck is going on. So my book and my philosophy is just slightly better than that, but the ultimate goal is out here. It's almost inapproachable, but we can try to, and mine is the first step in that direction. But people will reject my attempt to go outside the cave and show you the one eye, the one light, the one sun, right? They don't want to go out of the cave, but they have to wrestle. We have to wrestle them free slowly from their chains, right?
We have the solid foundation.
And if we can't do that, possibly we are going to fucking force them out of the cave, right? And then they can get we have to lock them inside a concentration camp, carriage. And we'll drag them the fuck out of the cave. Because they need to, the stupid peasants.
To take the next step. And the next step, if one were to tell right now on this public interview, this public trialogue and conversation.
The next steps, yes, are all planned out, right? Yes, I have a 10-step plan, right? The 95 theses, the Mayos, the Little Red, Mein Kampf, and so on, right? Oh, I'm hyperbolic? Hyperbolic, am I? Well, I'm going with principles here, right? He's working from principles. His starting is a principle called you can cherry pick whatever you want to be the base, right? So he's working on principle, apparently. Undisclosed principle, I might add, right? I'm also working from principles, right? So the principles, I have a plan for humanity, right? I am channeling my daemon, which is another way of saying I'm the son of a god, right?
We are having. If I were to just tell you what I think the next step will be, you will immediately understand why it's not useful right now. It's not helpful.
Let's have it.
It will just make the whole discussion unstable.
Oh, yes. And he's saying people like Manny Beale, he will come and criticize it. And that's because he doesn't like it. It doesn't fit with his narrative. So he's trying to fight it, but it's because he doesn't want it. It's not because he's a good philosopher or anything like that. He can't argue. No. It's not because there's something wrong with my philosophy. It's because he doesn't want it. He's going to fight it, right? So expect people like Manny Beale to come around and say I'm weird. But I'm not. It's just because he's crazy. I'm not crazy. He's crazy, right?
And to lead to some self-defensive reactions by some pundits who just say, oh, no, then I don't want to go there.
Oh, some pundits. Oh, yeah, like Manny Beale, right? Yes.
This goes too far. I don't want to go there. So, yeah, it's, it's like trying to explain general relativity and quantum field theory.
To a monkey, right? Let's have it.
To the great Goethe. The most intelligent...
the what? Great Goethe? You mean Wolfgang Goethe? Wolfgang Amadeus Goethe? The greater Goethe? What? Who? Who the hell was that?
General relativity and quantum field theory to the great Goethe.
Oh, the great Goethe. Okay. The great Goethe. Yes. Yes. He had an IQ around 500 or so, but he fucked up the idea of light and colors, right?
The most intelligent man of his time would be completely discombobulated if we tried to tell him the whole story.
How the hell do you know? One of the smartest men in apparently in human history. If you sat down and had a talk with him, I think I could explain relativity for him, right? I think I could, right? But you're trying to what's it called? You're trying to preempt reactions to your shitty philosophy, not because it's shitty philosophy, but because people are too stupid to understand it, right? This is a very sophist way of trying to make people eat and forego what might happen when you're trying to force feed this sophistry to people and the reaction, and you're trying to classify that action. You're trying to groom people into a potential reaction and classify that reaction before you have an idea of why they might react that way. Therefore, thereby crowd controlling people who might come with criticism, as if all criticism must be some kind of psychological or gut reaction from somebody who's too stupid to understand this big thing, right?
Would it be useful? No, it wouldn't be useful. No, he was engaged in an argument against Newton about the nature of color. So he was not even in the cognitive neighborhood of exploring the quantized nature of color.
So cognitive and quantity of nature of color. Okay, how does that fit with your ontology? You just call it every time you mention this, you call it just dashboard or perception, and that's it, right? Would you mind describe the intricacies of this dashboard and how it works, rather than using needles and dials? There are no needles and dials in my experience, right? Unless I just actually bump upon a needle and a dial. And would I know that then it's a metaphor, an actual direct experience or a cognition, by the way, right? So he references all sorts of shit that is not mentioned in his ontology, right? That's a very, very big weakness. Excuse me.
He was still in the debate, is it a particle, is it a wave? Do all colors exist in white or not? Goethe thought, no, white is a color, it's not a mixture of colors. Newton is wrong. So, and here is the most intelligent man of his time. So the same thing applies now. It's not helpful to have a discussion about the nature of the deeper mysteries in which we are surrounded at this point. We first have to acclimatize to some of the basics. And the next step will not be taken by me or you or anybody.
Oh, so yeah, I have to sit here for it. That nothing will actually happen the next 30, 40 years. So I will have to sit here and keep writing books, 2 books a year, and I will just spam the world with this thinking. But nothing will happen. I predict nothing will happen while I'm living. So I just can keep on doing what I'm doing, right? I don't want to actually go out there and convince people of anything, because he can't. Because it's just one big pile of mumbo jumbo, right? With all sorts of flaws built into it, as I have listed up here. So obviously not going to eat it because it's crap philosophy. Not because they can't digest it, but because when they try to digest it and they actually can think for themselves, they find all sorts of shortcomings that has to be addressed before any attempt of trying to apply this to your everyday life, right?
Alive today.
What kind of fairy tale land is he living in, by the way? And who the hell does he think he is? I come up with some thinking. We have to roll it out. Yes, but people are going to not like it. But we have to force feed the shit to them, right? We have to go there because I'm so fucking smart. I've been talking to my mind daddy. And he wants this to be rolled out because I have a demon. You don't have free will. So shut the fuck up, peasant.
we can intuit it. We can.
I think this is enough about this, and we are approaching the 1 hour mark. So 20 seconds to finalize this, right? I hope you enjoyed. Have a nice day. See you in the next one. Bye bye.